Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today I am starting a new series that I'm not entirely certain I'm going to finish because my mandate for this channel was supposed to be books that I read that I liked, and I liked several books in this series, but I'm not totally sure how much I liked the last one or how much I actually want to go there. So I'll get there when I get there, but I quite enjoyed the first several, so we'll go at least that far. So what is this series? This is the Glamourist Histories series, and as you can see, because, haha, look the cover, this is Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Kowal. Kowal? I don't actually know how to pronounce her last name. And this is, as you can see by the statement from the Jane Austen Center, this is very Jane Austen-inspired, right down to the spelling, which is deliberately archaic in the style of spelling of the period. That is, surprise being spelt with a Z at the end. That sort of thing, which is very much a Regency era sort of spelling. She's very much emulating the style of writing, and more than that, aspects of this you can see in this story, bits and pieces of Pride and Prejudice. It's a little bit like Pride and Prejudice if you only had like the eldest sister and the foolish youngest one who wound up married off to that awful guy at the end of Pride and Prejudice, and had just those two instead of everybody else. The mother is clearly Pride and Prejudice inspired because she is a self-inflicted invalid, which admittedly is not much like the one in Pride and Prejudice. But the fact that she is a slightly woolly-headed, foolish woman obsessed with a certain amount of social climbing and getting her daughters married off in that kind of public fashionista way, while the father is the calm and centered and sensible one out of the two parents, is very, very reminiscent of the setup of Pride and Prejudice. So this is really trying very, very hard at that. Now, I am no judge of this kind of thing, in no small part because, of course, as I have said before, I don't read good literature. I read fluff because I like fluff. I have put more stuff that is not fluff on this channel than I am normally inclined to read, and a good deal of that has actually come from those self-assigned little things that I've had my father create for me because he actually likes real literature. So let's talk about the conceit of this particular historical fantasy, because we're basically saying that this is Regency England. We're positing that this magic that exists in this reality has not in any way affected society, history, culture, any of that stuff. That this is all just as it was, and there is no difference. I frankly suspect that if magic were real, it would have resculpted the socio-political landscape. But, you know, you can't do you can't have everything. And, of course, it wouldn't be Regency England if you had resculpted the socio-political landscape, so there you go. So what we have here is a magic that this particular author is running with, magic where we're dealing with that intersection of magic and physics. That is, she's very, very, very aware of physical limitations of casters, that when you use this magic you overheat, that you can cause yourself to suffer severe physical strains, she makes it very, very clear that people pass out when they spend too much time creating these folds. Second, there is a lot of discussion of physics stuff, because what you're doing is manipulating you're effectively manipulating particles. You're manipulating light. You're manipulating waves and sound. And what it means is that, for example, the man that our heroine eventually winds up marrying, he invents a way to make yourself invisible, but it can't move with you because of how this works, because you have to tie off the magic, or else, in effect, if you don't do that, then you have to physically hold it in place yourself, and that's exhausting. But this concept of the sphère obscurcie, which is a obscuring sphere, that it works on the principles that we have always considered that invisibility would have to work on in the physical real world, and that is bending light around something so that what you see is not what is in front of you. You see, light travels in straight lines except when it's bent by gravity, but the amount of bending that we see, for example, on planet Earth is virtually nil, because the Earth's gravitational field is not strong enough to affect light in ways that are sufficiently significant for it to be seen by our poor human senses. So light travels in a straight line, and then it bounces off of objects and is reflected or not reflected, depending on the nature of the object. That's why some things appear black, because they absorb light, and other things appear lighter because they reflect it back. Like you learn in high school physics or grade school science classes. I don't remember when I learned that. It was in school. Anyways, the point is that in order to be invisible, what you have to do is you have to make the light effectively get to the point where it is about to touch you, then circle around you, and then keep on going, so that when it reflects back, it reflects off of the stuff behind you and then circles around you and then goes back to traveling in the straight line it was in before. That makes you invisible. The issue, of course, with invisibility is that when you are bending the light around yourself, it means that you have no light, and so you are existing in a tiny ball of darkness, which is why, in terms of physics, pure and undiluted physics, pure invisibility is simply not possible. That's where, of course, magic comes in to make invisibility possible. But in effect, what this man has done is he has figured out how to bend light around yourself and yet still manage to maintain enough light inside of your little bubble that you can see stuff. But the problem is that by tying it off, it means that it can't travel with you, and thus is the problem is that they have not figured out how to make these light things movable. Like, they can make a moving scene, sort of, a tableau where there is some movement, but they can't move the tableau itself around. It's kind of like, you have movement on a TV set, but the movement inside the TV set can't go anywhere. It has to stay with your TV set. And so the thing is that she's very, very good at this because she's worked hard at it. But as is traditional in many Western cultures, arts that are seen as girly things when they are done at anything less than the professional level immediately become man's work when they are at the professional level. That is, women are cooks, men are chefs. This is one of the great traditional divisions that, we are still trying to break down as a society, yada yada, not really talking about that. And so Mr. Vincent is very, very good. He is an artist at this, but she is also very, very good at it, and when they first meet, she is fascinated by the technicals of his doing his glamourie, and she looks into it, she examines it until she figures out how it's done. And he is impressed by it. And of course, instead of saying he's impressed by it and trying to woo her, he instead kicks up a big stink and makes her believe that he hates her because, well, he continues to act like that right up until she saves his life, and then he hands her the journal in which, for the last, several pages of the journal, he goes on endlessly about how awesome she is, and she's like, oh, well then, I guess he is in love with me, and stuff. Anyways, it's a really, really interesting magic system, so to speak, because it's sort of like this. It's sort of like you've given them this tiny bit of ability, and then everything else in it kind of just runs off of physics. So it's a magic system that has some really interesting, stringent bindings, but at the same time, if you just understand the science enough, you can probably science yourself all kinds of exciting and unusual thoughts and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I enjoyed this greatly because it's a much easier read than Jane Austen, because Jane Austen is a good writer where I have to actually pay attention and stuff, and I don't have to pay nearly as much attention because despite her best efforts, there is a great deal of late 20th, early 21st century perspective woven into this and woven into sentence structure and so on and so forth. So, if you're looking for Jane Austen light with a fantasy twist, this is it. If you're looking for actual Jane Austen, you should probably just go read some Jane Austen. So I have actually, after all, read the whole series, so one of the things that I've been doing when talking about this is studiously trying not to get ahead of myself in terms of talking about it, so I'm not going to do that. I am, however, going to comment briefly on this front cover picture, because what is wrong with her right eye, or, the left one if you're talking about, my left, her right, because she's holding her head, she's looking, and the way her eye is closed, it looks weird. I don't know. There's something about how closed her eye looks that it's why is that one eye closed and the other eye isn't? And I know she's just peering sideways, but, this is one of those things where that just doesn't look right, and this should have been redone or retouched or something, because that is a highly problematic thing. It is really, really distracting me. I'm sitting here and I'm trying to talk about the book and I'm just looking at her eye and going, what's wrong with her eye? Why is there something wrong with her eye? This is the rambling part of Bookish Ramblings, by the way. The part where I look at a cover and just can't stop talking about it. I mean, because other than the eye, it's a very good cover. The notes are evocative because, how I said physics? One of the things that they do in this is they use the magic to enhance sound as much as anything else, which very much suggests to me that they're kind of just manipulating, atoms and molecules in the air and so on in terms of how they're doing it. I don't know, she may even be thinking sort of that whole light is a particle as well as a wave or something, which is not a thing I know about because I don't science. Anyways, I have eaten up basically all of my time because, my self-appointed 15-minute limit, so that is everything, and I guess I will see you all next week.